End of the year. 2025 has flown past, but you're here because you're either doing one of three things. Number one, thinking of moving to Halifax, Nova Scotia. Number two, thinking it's time to sell. Or number three, thinking it's time to buy. Well, here on my channel, Halifax Homes and Lifestyles with me, you are in the right place because we're going to give you all of the details and update you on everything in terms of the December end of year month and what we think is going to actually transpire into 2026. So let's get into it. Okay, well, the first thing we always like to start with is what is the average selling price? So in December, it hit $630,000, which was up a little bit from the previous month in November, which was 626. So we're up just under 1% at 0.7. Now, also when we looked at November, we knew that November last year didn't really change that much in selling price. So when we look at December this year, that didn't actually change too much either because that was 623. We're at 630. So we're up just over 1% on that number as well. So not a great amount of change in terms of the average price. And that gives us the key message for basically the Halifax market for the majority of, I'd say, the last quarter, last half of 2025, which is stability. There's a little bit more sensibility coming into the market. It means that buyers aren't rushing to make decisions. They have a little bit more time. They certainly have a lot more choice to actually look at. And with the mortgage rates being kind of where they are, which is kind of like stabilized as well with not a lot of changes going on there, it just brings that whole almost like level playing field of stability. It's just we're not seeing the prices come down. We're seeing inventory levels still stay pretty low, but with the prices hanging where they are, with the sellers, they're doing pretty good in terms of the sales to list price. But again, we're seeing an awful lot of price drops. So that's the key message for sellers is, and we'll hit this one later on when we talk about price drops, you've got to be accurate in terms of your pricing so that you don't chase the market. You're not constantly having to come back and do price corrections to then get the offer at the actual sale to list price. Now that sale to list price is actually at 97.4%, which equates to a $17,000 price difference between where people list and when people get their offers accepted and go unconditional and sold. That's a big number because if we go back, say 5 or 6 months ago to June or July of 2025, we can see that that number was more like 99.7%. And yes, we know the average selling price was high as well. It was like in the 650s, 660s, something like that. But that was 99.6, 99.7. Now we're at 97.4%. So that's some big price reductions, $17,000, as we just mentioned, off the actual average sale price from listing to sale. Now, when we compare that also to the average days on market hitting 52 days on market, that was only 44 last month and 39 last year. Those are some big changes, like 39 days, 44 days, 52 days. Those are some big changes in the number of days on market for properties to actually get sold. But what we didn't really see this month was an increase in the amount of inventory. So actives for sale this month are sitting at 640, whereas last month that was 858. So we do have a 25% drop in the amount of active homes for sale. This is December. Remember, January will be a similar low number as well because yes, there's been some new listings that we've seen come up in the last couple of days. But again, a lot of people in January are probably waiting more until February or March before we actually put some listings on the market. So that's when you'll start seeing a bit of an uptick in the number of listings that go on. Probably relational as well to the number of sales that take place in February, March, and April, because that's primarily our spring market. And that's when we'll see more properties come on the market, more activity. What we're hoping we don't see, and I think this is going to be a theme for next year, we're not going to see some big price increases. Like, yes, the summer of this year, we hit a massive $655,000, maybe $660,000 price point. Now we're in kind of the 630. So yes, we've come down a little bit, but certainly over the last 4 or 5 months, we've seen a lot more, again, here's that word, stability in the actual sale price that we're seeing in the market for the whole of HRM. Now, when we look into the number of sales in the month, that was actually at 247 homes that were actually sold. Compare that to last month at 305, we're down about 20%, but very similar in terms of the number when we go back to December last year. So again, this is December. It's typically one of the months, December and January, that are a lot quieter in our Halifax market, just because everybody's getting ready for the Christmas vacation. There's also not that many, almost like, should we call them like trading weeks, so to speak, in that last month of December, when realistically there's probably about 10 to maybe even 12 days when lawyers aren't around, banks are pretty much shut down. So there can't really be a huge amount of activity. So December, even though it's 4 weeks, really it's about 2.5 weeks. So you're trying to get a lot of sales crammed into that first 2 weeks of December. It can't happen that much, especially when you look at the number of inventory levels. When we get into inventory levels, we always talk in the number of months of inventory that we've actually got listed for sale right now. And that is currently sitting at 2.6 months for the month of December. It was 2.8 months last month, 2.7 the month before. So again, not a lot of change. But when we look at the number of new listings that came to the market, that was only 181 homes. Now, last month, new listings were 304. Last year, new listings were 186. So when we go from last month to this month and just look at the number of new listings that came onto the market in December, that was down by 40% from the previous month. So there has to be another number that we're not really talking about, shall we say, when you look at the number of months of inventory kind of staying steady when sales are down, the number of new listings are down, but the inventory months didn't really pick up. And that's where that missing number, which is called the cancel, the expires, and the withdrawns, they all basically mean the same thing. The expires is when somebody has a listing agreement that says, we're going to try this for 90 days. And after 90 days, if the property didn't sell, the sellers have that option to basically say, well, we're just going to let ourselves expire. House comes off the market, it didn't work, and obviously that reduces down the number of houses that are actually for sale, the active for sale. The second and the third one are withdrawals and cancellations. Now, a withdrawal is just because the seller changed their mind. Before they hit the end of that listing agreement, they basically turned to their realtor and said, take it off the market. Like, we're withdrawing it. We don't want to actually keep it for sale. So just take it off the market and we'll figure out what's next. Cancellations work pretty much the same way, because a cancellation is, we're done. Like, we are absolutely cancelling the agreement. So withdrawal, you can actually come back on the market. Cancellation, you're just basically killing the whole deal. So that was 25% of all the properties that were actually kind of put back onto the market. That's the missing equation, that basically those properties came off the market and they are not coming back on. Now, they could relist in January or February, but typically those people are either, we wanted to try, it didn't work, we didn't get our price, we didn't get any offers, we didn't get any viewings, therefore we're out. Or even they just naturally said, well, okay, we're just going to let it expire. Maybe we'll try with a different realtor, different marketing strategy, different price points, different year, all of those options as well. But like I say, that was 25%. So that took a quarter of all the listings that were for sale at the end of November. That was a quarter, and they all came off the market in December. So that, combined with low levels of new listings and not a lot of sales, that's why our inventory levels are staying at the 2.6 months. Now let's look at the sales to new listing ratio, because this jumped a lot in the month of December. We're at 136% in December. Last month, that was only 100%. Now, 100% means the new properties that we listed, we more or less sold the same number. The fact that we've gone up means that the number of sales we did was higher than the number of new listings to the market. And again, that would suggest that the number of months of inventory would go up, but they didn't, because of those expireds, cancels, and withdrawns. So when we look at last year, that was 128%. So again, it's kind of a similar theme. And that's why I always like to look at, not only compare it to last month, but we want to compare it to last year, because really the month on month, our Halifax market doesn't change that dramatically. Well, did in 2020 and 2021 and 2022, but realistically 24 and 25 we're back into that normal kind of a market. So you get a better feel for exactly what is happening with the typical months. That's why we like to compare this month this year to this month last year. If it's wildly different, then we know that there's something's changing in the market, but this month it's not wildly different compared to December 2024. For the full year, I wanted to go into the volume of transactions that we actually did, because this year we actually did 4,400 transactions in 2025 compared to last year of 4,900. We're actually down 10% on the sales volume. So the number of deals that happened, the number of houses that were sold, were down 10%. Same thing for the number of listings. 5,800 new listings were put on the market in the whole of 2025. 2024, that was 6,300. So we're down 8% on the overall transactions for this year, new listings to last year's new listings to sales this year to sales to last year. And that really shows that there has been a lot bigger, almost let's say buyer sentiment and buyer mentality of let's just wait. Let's just wait and see what's happening. We've got a little bit more time. We've got more properties to view. Properties are taking 52 days on the market to sell, so we actually have a bit more time. All of those factors come into play when you start looking at what's really going on behind the scenes in the market of Halifax. One thing we've done all of the, well, I won't say all of this year, but certainly last 6 months, maybe even 4 months, is we've talked about the price drops in terms of how much did somebody originally list at to what price did they were listed at. Yeah, what price were they listed at when they had an offer accepted? And the difference between what they originally listed at and what the listing price was when an offer was accepted, that's the price drops that we actually had. Now, yes, we know that there's another, what did we say, $17,000 difference between the sale price and the list price. But let's go list price to original list price. And the average of that was a $48,000 price drop. Let that sink in a little bit, because we'll go through the individual price brackets as well. And the top 3 markets, we'll talk about their price drops as well, because this has really become a big factor that nobody's really been talking about, which is get your original list price fairly accurate. I'm not saying bang on, but fairly accurate in terms of what the buyer will be looking for in terms of price, condition, and location. If the condition and the location don't match that price, you will not be getting viewings on your property, and you will certainly not be getting an offer on your property. Or if you do get one viewing, you'll get a pretty low ball offer, because buyers are a lot more clued up to exactly what is going on in the market and the access to the information they have in terms of pricing. Viewpoint is a wonderful site. For sellers, though, it does give people accuracy. It gives the buyers accuracy and visibility of what your neighbor might have sold for, what your purchase price was when you bought the property, and what the condition of the property was when you bought it. So if you haven't done any updating and you're expecting a pretty hefty price increase, it's going to be questionable in the terms of buyers looking at that and whether they're going to actually say, okay, that makes sense, or actually, do you know what, we're just going to wait and pass on that house and we'll go find something else, or we'll wait until you've done a $40-something thousand price drop to then make more sense in terms of looking at the price when it's time to write an offer. So we had 247 sales, because that was the number of sales in the month. And when we look at the number of price drops, that was 97 price drops out of that 247, which means 40% of all the houses that sold did a price drop on average of, what did we say, $47,000 to actually get to the point where they had an accepted offer. Now, let's compare that to last month, because last month that number was 42%. So it didn't change too much. It's not as if all of a sudden we had to do a lot more price drops to get offers accepted and get houses sold compared to the previous month. But one thing we will do is absolutely for the next months, we will start putting that as an actual number to give you guys an idea exactly what's going on. Because if you want to know what's really happening here in the Halifax market, these are the stats you need to know. My channel is the one you need to follow, and they are going to give you, and we will give you all the information about everything to do with moving to Nova Scotia, selling your house, investing here, looking at lakefronts, what Nova Scotia life is like, what Halifax life is like. So make sure you hit the button and subscribe. Right, let's get into the price ranges in terms of how many units sold in the price range, because that'll give you a feeling for like which price range is the most popular based on the number of transactions that sold, and also what were the price drops and the number of houses that had to do price drops in that area. So starting off in the $0 to $400,000 price range, 28 properties were sold in that price range. 9 properties had to do an average price drop of $47,000, which basically means 32% of the houses in that price range had to do a price drop. $400,000 to $500,000, that was 57 properties, of which 21 had to do a $39,000 price drop, which gives us a 37% of houses in that area. $500,000 to $600,000, that was 60 properties, with an average of $33,000 on a price drop, and 30 houses being 50% actually had to do those price drops. $600,000 to $700,000, we are looking at 30 homes for sale. 12 of them did a price drop at an average of $40,000 there. $700,000 to $800,000, we had 21 properties sold in that one. Only 3 actually had to do a price drop there, and the average price drop though was pretty hefty at $60,000. $800,000 to $900,000, 17 sales there. 7 had to do a price drop at an average of $54,000, so getting up there now and getting quite chunky in terms of the number of price drops, which also therefore meant it was 41% of properties in that price bracket. $900,000 to $1 million, we actually had 13 houses sold in that price bracket, 4 of which had to do a price drop, and the average was $62,000, which is only 31% of the houses there. $1 to $2 million, we actually had 20 sales in that price bracket, so that's quite a lot, and of which 11 of them had to do a price drop at an average of $105,000, which meant 55%. And then we just had 1 sale that was over $2 million. No price reduction there. Okay, let's get into our top 3 markets. Now, number 1, that was Timberley Prospect St. Margaret's Bay with a $670,000 price drop. $675,000 listed, meaning it was only like a 1% price reduction. And the average there was a $34,000 price drop. 35 days on market, 30 sales in the month, and that's why they were number 1, because we always pick the sales volume as to who's number 1 and sells the most in our HRM market. 95 homes for sale there puts them at just over 3.2 months of inventory. Number 2, East Hants, Colchester West, Enfield, Elmsdale, Lance area, as well as covering kind of down into Mount Uniacke as well. $460,000 price there for sale, $474,000 list price. That gives them a minus 3% price difference between list price and sale price, which equates to $14,000. But interestingly, they also had to do a $68,500 price drop to get from a list price to then a list price that actually means that somebody sends an offer. That's a big price drop in that particular area. 73 days on market, so basically 2.5 months to get your houses sold there. Only 25 sales in the month, 73 were active for sale. That gives 2.9 months of inventory. Coming in at number 3, we have Bedford. We have an $847,000 sale price. List price of $866,500. That tells you that people are getting roughly 2.2%, $19,000 under asking price for the sale of the property. But also, let's not forget, we talk about average price drop, $41,000 average price drop on Bedford to get to that average list price. 63 days on market, so just over 2 months. 18 sales in the month, 41 for sale, giving us a 2.3 months of inventory. And that wraps up the whole of December. Now, when we start looking at 2026, we've already covered this a little bit in the beginning of the video. We're talking stability. I'm not seeing prices coming down any further than like we're at the 630, somewhere between 6 and 640, I think is going to be our average, but it will obviously depend on bigger price points as well. We're talking averages here, not the median price. So if an average and we sell a lot more in that $900,000 and above, which, you know, there was quite a few sales even in December. I mean, I think we talked about 20 sales in the 1 to 2 million price range. That was 10% of the actual volume of transactions that sold this month. So that's really what 2026 is going to bring to us, is a much more stable market. I see the months of inventory going up slightly, kind of getting into that 3 to 3.5 months. I think the days on market are going to stick around more like 40 to 50 in terms of days on market. And that's really going to be the story. So from a buyer's point of view, you definitely have a little bit more time. You have a little bit more choice. You have the ability to go and do some negotiating because, roughly 2.6%, I think it was, underneath asking price. So there's some good deals to be had out there right now. But in the meantime, have a fantastic start to your new year, and make sure that if you have any questions, you get in touch.